There is immense strength in softness. There is courage in choosing to heal, in setting down the heavy lifting, and in claiming your peace as a non-negotiable right. We are building the infrastructure for impact. A collective space where the diaspora can find tools, community, and the unshakable permission to slow down, process, and thrive. Your healing is not a luxury, it is the foundation. Join the movement. Let's build a softer, stronger tomorrow together.
Welcome to Black Mental Health Matters. My name is Dr. Joan Samuels-Dennis. I am a psychotherapist and the president of the Becoming Institute. We are streaming live to United States of Africa on the Black Mental Health Matters YouTube channel and on LinkedIn Live. Today, we will be discussing reparenting your inner child. I'm pleased to have with us Ebony, Baylock, Sydney, Elaine Butler, John Burton Jr., and Deshanti Huff. I am missing one person, and that's Wanjaru, and I'm going to say the name wrong. So Wanjaru, can I get you to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, Dr. Joan, you pronounced it well. It's 10. So yeah, you did it well with a bit of a Western accent, but perfectly well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Thank you so much. Childhood experiences, unmet emotional needs, and learned behaviors often continue to shape our relationships, our self-esteem, and daily lives long into adulthood. We all know this, and we understand it. Today, we are exploring how we can heal those early wounds and understand our emotional triggers, and practice self-compassion and set healthy boundaries, the healthy boundaries that are needed to reclaim our emotional well-being. So today I want to begin with John Burton Jr. John is a TEDx speaker, clinical therapist, award-winning storyteller, founder of the Burton Group, PR, and filmmaker behind Hush, as somebody is calling my name. John, how does our unhealed inner child show up specifically in Black men? And why does it often go unaddressed?
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm glad to be here amongst this cadre of wonderful women. And so to answer your question, when we talk about the inner child, we're not necessarily talking about a literal child inside of us. We're talking about the emotional memory of who we had to become in order to survive what we experienced. So the inner child, I think, carries questions and carries fears and beliefs and coping strategies that we developed before we had even the emotional maturity or even the vocabulary to understand what was really happening to us. For men in particular, sometimes the ladies got a pass, but sometimes the men in particular, we were told, don't cry, be strong, or if I'm good enough, people won't leave me, or maybe we learn nobody is coming to save you, so you're gonna have to save yourself.
Yeah.
And so all those are great things in order to be able to share, but you can grow up chronologically without growing up emotionally. And I think that's the thing that many of us have experienced. And that little boy or that little girl doesn't necessarily disappear, but they just grow up into their 30s or 40s and their 50s. And sometimes that child is just sitting in the driver's seat of a grown person's body, responding to life situations and without the necessary survival strategy. So in other words, the inner child isn't the immature part of you. It's the part of you that's still waiting for the adult version of you to come about.
I love that. It's the version of you that's waiting for the adult part of you to come. So, Sydney.
Yes.
Wanjaru, what would you like to add to that? If we're to describe the inner child and what mental health professionals are referring to as the inner child, how would you want to add to what John has just said? I'll let you go first, Sydney.
Yes, thank you. And John, I think you covered so much ground, and really thank you for really what you said about the inner child waiting for the adult. And I completely agree. And I think really understanding that safety has a huge piece to play with it, and how safety looks different over the years and it's ever evolving. But I think sometimes, things that happen to us as a child, we don't recognize weren't safe or not designed with us in mind. I lived with being neurodivergent and having disabilities, and so that's why I try to address in my work. And so really understanding how, just because things, and even understanding that things could have been okay, but it could have been better, and
Mm.
also understanding that you try to make sense of the world around you at no matter what age you are, and really now I think your inner child is really looking at how can we best support ourselves, and what does it look like to actually soothe our inner child, and what was missing in our childhood that we can now address now as adults, and really understanding how things that happen to us when we were younger impact how we're showing up today, and how we carry that with us. And we have to have the tools to know when to put that down, to honor that.
Thank you for that. The inner child has a perception, and that perception is simply that it's a very immature perception of any of our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But the inner child wants something. And I almost think that the inner child gets stuck where it is simply because that thing, that deeper need is not met. So, Manjuru, as you think about the inner child and what most of us are desiring and wanting at that stage in life, talk to us about what the deep needs are of any of us, and what the inner child is desiring.
I think the word that comes to mind is unconditional positive regard. And that
Mm-hmm.
covers a lot when it comes to the children, We're supposed to love them unconditionally. They're supposed to understand that our love is not pegged on what they do. They don't have to be prim and proper for us. It's acceptance. It's trust. It's all the things that any, human being would want to thrive. And so the inner child, sometimes people confuse the parts of our inner child and assume that that's temperamental. We think that's just who I am. Again, because as John said, it's the parts of us that are programmed a certain way from experiences, either positive experiences or negative experiences. And so because it happens before we have the words to describe them and before we have the awareness of it, it becomes almost like a default, a way that you function. And so, for the most part, we think that's just who I am because that's all you've known yourself to be. And so, the inner child, I think most of the time we default to the programmings that happened when we were, forming a sense of self and our early experiences. And so, I think that becomes a big part of, parenting ourselves. And as John said, you can be whatever age, you can be a 5-year old in a 45-year-old body, but we never seem to be consciously aware of that. We see the 45-year-old and we assume that the emotional age matches the chronological age, which is not necessarily always the case. Yeah, so yeah.
Thank you for that. A question then to all of you: is the inner child really the wisest part of who we are?
Hmm. I don't know if wisest is the right word, but I think it guides us. It
Yes.
helps. And because I think the definition of wise is so vast and can be in, I think when a lot of people think wise, they think older, right? So it's an interesting dynamic of you saying that. But I think it really does serve kind of as a North Star or a guiding post for some of us,
Yes.
and recognizing, and even just sitting with that when we see your inner child coming up in different situations. Why is it coming up? How is it coming up? Is it, because I think when we talk about inner child, it can be, from the wounds from our childhood, but also the joy from our childhood, and having that childlike joy again and chasing that, and what that looks like in our day to day. And so I think, I don't know if wise is the right word, but I think a guide for sure.
Is wisdom not love, though? And the
Mm-hmm.
ability to love as the inner child wants
Mm-hmm.
unconditional love. There's certainly, as you said, a North
Mm-hmm.
Star. And the North Star is, how does love show up for me? And if the
Mm-hmm.
child didn't know something had gone wrong, then the child wouldn't be attempting to correct it. So when I use the word wisdom, is there a deep knowing that the child possesses that is then confronted with the reality of the experience we all have, and then does the formation of what we might call the ego inner child, or
Mm-hmm.
the exiled inner child,
Mm-hmm.
or the protective inner child, do those simply form because the inner wisdom that we have about what our human experience is supposed to be didn't show up right here? And we're
Mm,
aggravated by it, we're grieving it, we're
Mm-hmm.
demanding that it shows up. In a lot of ways, we're saying, do it right the
Mm-hmm.
first time. So I'll ask the question again, John, is the child the wisest part of who we are?
I was chomping at the bit as Sydney was talking, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's the wisest part. I would say it's the most authentic part.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that inner child in us is the most authentic part of who we are. We've had to continue to grow. We've had to continue to mature with an emptiness that we haven't been able to fulfill yet. And so as we are trying to fulfill that part, I think, as you said, there is I think you used the word wisdom, but I think that there is a place that says something is wrong, something is not aligned within me personally. And we go on a search for what that is, and then we find different coping mechanisms to try to fulfill that until someone gives us the language of saying, let's talk about your childhood, because we all know that we have to revert back to, let's talk about your childhood first, and then you start uncovering the layers, and then you start seeing where the pathologies are connected to your current day. And so I think that we get to the point where we have almost bled out before we have the opportunity to be able to know what has really injured us or cut us.
Hmm. You gave me pause there. I'm going to bring in Sydney again, and I don't think I introduced her properly the first time. Sydney is an HRDEIA consultant, coach, and founder of Accessible Create, specializing in neurodiversity and disability employment through human centered strategies. So, Sydney, my question is this: building on what John just said,
Yeah.
how does this inner child drive our reaction in stress? If it is desiring a certain outcome, how
Mm-hmm.
does chronic strain, relationship strain, career strain, work
Mm-hmm.
environment strain, how does it process and react to stress?
Oh, that's a big one, but I think I think really I have seen in my own life how it impacts, and how I think when you think stress gets you, letting things build up, then it really starts to come out and to really impacts you in ways. And so I try to be proactive and, do self-care and whatever that looks like to me. The little small things, doing my workouts, doing my yoga, taking my dog for a walk. And I can see a difference when I am actively taking care of myself and being proactive versus when I'm letting the stress build up, when I'm not talking it out with someone. And I think sometimes with the stress, it feels, I think the inner child is, I don't want to say selfish, but is very me centric sometimes. And so sometimes it's kind of like, woe is me. Why is this all happening to me? And so, but really sitting with that and being like, okay, why are we stressed? And really, again, pulling back those layers, being in community and not isolating ourselves. But sometimes our inner child does want to isolate when we are stressed. We don't want to be a burden onto others, but instead being like, hey, we are stressed, but we need to go for a walk with our dog. We need to be around family. We need to be around community. What do we need in this moment? And I think sometimes I've also been guilty of, having unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think that's also the inner child coming out, right? And just catching yourself with just like, are we, again, that soothing of the inner child comes up sometimes with stress. And is it a good soothing or is it kind of harming you soothing? And because I don't think the inner child sometimes knows the difference. And so it's now the adult self that has to kind of that reparenting, like we're talking, the name of the topic of what we're talking about today, that inner reparenting the inner child to be like, okay, I know you want to go towards the things that aren't good for you right now when it comes to stress, but what are some good things we can do? Let's feel, and really figure it out.
So the inner child has a knowing, has certain desires that have erupted because of the experiences, is now in need of a parent, the adult self,
Yes.
that can now pay attention to those needs, notice when there is stress and the chronicity of that stress,
Mm-hmm.
but then be soothed by the one who understands in the adult form what it is that the child needs. So, Wanjuru, I'm wondering if you can speak to how do we go back and parent this part of ourselves, and how do we do it effectively? As Sydney says, sometimes we can do that well, and sometimes we're doing it in a maladaptive way. So now, how do we know what the parenting of self should, in a healthy way, how do we know what it should look like?
I usually think of it in three steps because they help me kind of simplify the conversation. So if I was to tell myself or tell anyone else, I go, how am I feeling right now? You know, and then try and find words for it if you can. Sometimes people don't have words to express what they're feeling, depending. But how am I feeling? Find a word. I find 5 words. The target is not to find perfection in description, just find a word that you feel best describes, and then go back a little bit and think what happened just before I felt how I'm feeling. So step one is find a word, then trace back a step before that, what happened, and then straight forward to what do I need. I think that's usually a good basis. And then you keep asking the why. What do I need? Why do I need it? I always say the why. The why never kind of comes to an end. It's like layers of an onion. You ask why and then you peel another layer. So how am I feeling? Yeah, why? Then go back a step, maybe two. What happened? Then come back. So because this thing that happened is making me feel this way, maybe that would answer another layer for why. Then what do I need? Even that need could be 50 different things. So why do I need that particular thing? So the why is always, I feel like it's always a good question to ask. Some people are triggered by the word why because based on their experiences, for some people it feels very commanding and very grilling. So I say if why triggers you, just ask how come, because how
Mm.
come tends to have a softer landing, right? So how come I'm feeling this way? How come when this happened I felt this way? How come I need this? Yeah. So maybe how come might give a softer landing.
I love that. So, John, weigh in on the vocabulary,
Sure.
because that's a really important part here. Obviously, we all have young children that are parts of our lives, whether they're our own children or whether they're the children of our relatives or people in our community. But when we're dealing with a child, obviously there are some who are elite and they speak almost as adults, but there are some that are also quite crippled and unable to engage, and then there's everything in between, right? So, John, how do we then now, we're an adult, how do we then now give the inner child a vocabulary that can address each of those three steps that Wanajuru just mentioned to us? So talk to us about that.
Wonderful. I'm just going to build on what Wanjaru said because she said it so excellently. Thank you. Um, but I would say build with begin with curiosity, because sometimes people can feel, because I'm a former journalist, sometimes people can feel like they are on some type of um, they're being questioned or interrogated, even in a therapist's office, and they never want to, and we never want to make them feel that way. So start by using the, I would say, the emotional dictionary. Instead of saying I'm good, and when a person says I'm good, ask, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Are you being peaceful? Are you disappointed? Are you anxious? Are you lonely? Are you overwhelmed? Because you may not be able, or because that person may not be able to effectively regulate what they cannot accurately identify. And so when the client tells you, "I don't know how I'm feeling," just begin to ask those real general questions and ask them out of curiosity, not out of interrogation, but begin to be able to do that in simple terms. I found that whenever I try to use clinical language, the client the client zones out, and so I'm
Mm.
more, but I get more from being able to talk just regular conversational language. Well, what happened? Can you tell me? Well, how did it make you feel?
Mhm.
Or what is it that you need? And so giving them that space to where it's not a, you're not trying to create a clinical diagnosis or trying to diagnose anything. You're just having a regular conversation. And so when you can do that, that's when I think you can give a voice, or give a care that didn't have a name. You give it a name.
Very good. Here's where I want to go next. I want to go back to what Wanjuru said, because I thought that was such a great way of what we call stacking, right? So first step
Mm-mm.
is we're going to verbalize, we're going to actually identify what it is, right? So we're now going to give the vocabulary. So I want each of you to do this for me. I want you to think about the last time you were really stressed, and what part of your inner child came forward, or which inner child, if there's more than one, came forward. And then as you then think about that inner child, give it a vocabulary. Then let's go through the steps that Wanjuru just introduced us to, so that we can give our audience a very practical way of doing this work as well.
Mm.
Reconnecting with the inner child is not something people can talk about it, but
Mhm.
it's not something that people often have an approach to doing. So let's reconnect with the inner child through you and demonstrate for the audience how they would move through these three steps. Wanjuru, you gave us the stacked levels. Walk us through one example where we are offering the inner child the opportunity to move through those steps with the adult version of self.
Mm. Um, so, for example, I am a teen coach, so I work with teens a lot. And so, say, a teen is felt triggered by something that maybe a parent asked. So why did you sleep late? Why haven't you done your homework? Let's say, and it could be just a harmless question. It could be a question about timing, right? But then you feel like it's maybe that day was a difficult day in school. And so you have all this pent up energy for feeling like you didn't perform and people are questioning your ability. And so another why triggers you. And so you overreact, right? And in that moment, I would say take a moment, sit with the emotion. I always say that they're not good and bad emotions. If you sit with them, they always, you know, lead us to a path where we can find answers. So sit with that emotion. Why did a simple question? What is it about that simple question that made you feel grilled, offended, irritated, And then so start unpacking the why. Why is a simple question which we know a parent can ask. Why haven't you done your homework at 9 p.m. at night? It's not an impractical question. So if it's practical, why did it make you feel so, irritated, triggered? And then you sit with it and you think, yeah, because I feel like I'm being questioned, like I'm a little child and I'm 15. And you say, oh, so you felt disrespected, you know, or you felt like someone was questioning your ability to self-manage. And so the why keeps coming back. And then, so what would you need? And moving forward, because you've gone back and thought, well, because I felt like I keep saying that I'm managing my time, I'll do it. I know I have homework to do, I'll do it. And so that's what happened a few minutes before you got triggered. Then moving forward, so what do you need? And then in that what you need, how then is the best way to communicate what you need? And sometimes, of course, what is needed may not be very practical, because sometimes teenagers want freedom that is beyond, um, but then again, I think the most important thing is it opens up conversations. And once we can sit and have conversations without being defensive, I think we're halfway there. And
Fantastic.
everything is not about finding an absolute answer. It's just keeping an openness to taking the journey. You might find you unpack more than you are looking for, but I think it's more of an attitude of openness to taking that journey. Just walk and see where it takes you. Yeah.
Very good. Sydney, build
Yes.
on that. Take an example of a moment from your life. Connect with the younger child that was really coming forward. Offer that child some compassion and demonstrate to our audience how they might undertake this in their bathroom, in their bedroom, in their basement, in their garage, anywhere that they might be in a park, just outside the work parking lot.
Yeah, so I think sometimes with my stress, for example, I think I feel like again, I run my own business and I have my own consultancy, and so I have to do a lot of different things in a day. And so, but sometimes if I don't accomplish everything I set out that day, or I push it back. And so then I feel stressed because I feel like I was lazy and didn't accomplish everything on my to-do list. And that my inner child is like, we're called lazy. We're not doing enough. We need to be doing more. We had a plan to do more. Why didn't we finish it? And so then now sitting with myself and being like, hey, we got the three things that we really needed to get done today. We accomplished those three things that, we submitted something to a client. We did work on our business. We took care of ourselves today, right? We did our workout, for example. And I think with that, really sitting with that and being like, and then asking, how come I feel like this? Like, and being like, because again, as a child, being called lazy, not feeling like I'm doing enough, and then recognizing that, hey, we're doing enough, and then we have to take care of ourselves. So sometimes I don't complete my to-do list because I take those moments to, again, go for cuddle, even just cuddle my dog, or sometimes I'm exhausted because I've worked 13 hours a day before and I need a nap the next day, or I just need to watch something mindlessly on Netflix or something. And so it's like, but in order to do the work that we're really doing and the work we're proud of, and to show up every day, even just a little bit, we need to take that step back and take care of ourselves, and we finish our cups first, right? So that's kind of how I do it in real time.
John, how do you fill your cup by connecting with this younger version of yourself and offering compassion? Move us through the steps, please.
Wow. Um, as I was listening to my other two colleagues, they took all the good stuff, but I'm going to try to add on to what they said. Um, Myself, and I think about, as Sydney was saying, avoidance, and then making sure that, because I used to suffer from a spirit of procrastination. I'll put it off. I will put it off. I'll put it off. But then I had to talk to my inner child and be able to tell them, you know, when you put it off, you're stressing yourself. You know, when you put it off, your jaw is clenched. You get overstimulated. Your anxiety goes out the roof. And so if you are procrastinating, if you stop procrastinating and get this thing done, you won't have those symptoms anymore. And so I found that when I start putting more language, more rationalization into those things that I was dealing with before, I successfully helped reparent that inner child in me, because the inner child in me that wants to, oh, I want to watch TV, I want to go outside, I want to do this, I want to do that, and I'm procrastinating, and I'm relying on the ability that I'm going to have time, the ability that my mind is going to be fresh, the ability to know that I have the bandwidth in order to be able to do it, because I'm not adding in. What if other things come in? What if life starts lifing? What if family starts familying? And so I look at all those things and I say, stop, get this done so you can move forward. And again, as Sydney would say, that is one thing off the checklist. And then I can feel good about myself. I can feel good that I'm accomplished for that day. And Sydney, if I could just speak a word into you that was given to me,
Mhm.
you have to be able to know and to validate yourself. You did what you could do for that day, and then pat your own self on the back and say, that was good for today. And then you're going to
Yeah.
move
Mm.
into the next
Thank
day
you, John.
with the next day.
Yeah.
You know, as a clinical faith-based therapist, I use that example all the time. And I am ordained clergy, and so I use the Bible sometimes as my platform. And I tell people, go back to the book of Genesis. When you look at the creation story, that's what God did. He worked for 6 days. But mind you, how when he worked for 6 days, he did something particular on that day. And then he stopped. He didn't work late.
Yep.
He didn't pull everything into the next day. He did everything he needed to do for that day. And then get this, y'all. He said, and it was good. And he went to bed.
He went to sleep.
He went to bed to sleep. And then the next day's task was the next day's task. And then he did that for 6 days. And then he rested. He was like, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And so he rested on the seventh day. And so for me in my particular audience or demographic, they're able to understand that. And so they may not be able to understand the prior example, but they if when I put it into biblical terms, oh yeah, I understand that. That makes total sense.
Mm.
I love that. Thank you, John. So I want to ask a question. I'd like each of you to weigh in. Is the inner child always injured? Is there never an inner child that is healthy, vibrant, jubilant? Does it always have to
Yeah.
be injured?
Yeah, I think I was talking a bit about it earlier, and I think again, it can be joyful, right? And for example, I used to like to collect Happy Meal toys as a kid, right?
Mm,
And I had that experience. Like, my papa would take me, my grandfather would take me to McDonald's, me and my brother to McDonald's, and we would get McDonald's toys, and that would be that was one of the most one of the most powerful memories I have from my childhood. And so sometimes I don't want the whole Happy Meal toy. Sometimes I want just the toy, and so I just ask, "Hey, can I have the toy?" And what's the worst thing they could say? No. I just move on. I'm like, okay, but you never know unless you ask. And so I go, I'm like, hey, like I think I got recently it was like they had a Hello Kitty Ninja Turtles collab, and I love both those things growing up too. And I was like, can I just have the toy? They're like, oh, you just want the toy? I was like, yes, please. And and they didn't ask who it was for. They didn't, no judgment. They were just like, oh, that would be $2, ma'am, and then gave them the $2 and got the
you
toy.
had to pay
And
for
my
it?
inner, I did. Everything. It's 2026, John. You have to pay for everything. But I have my adult money that I can spend how I please, and to honor that joyful inner child, right? And so, and then my partner used to love Yu-Gi-Oh cards and started recently collecting Yu-Gi-Oh cards again and other types of trading cards, right? And so I think it can be joyful, and I think it's a way of adult life can be hard, and it can, in the thick of it sometimes. And so that joyful aspect of the inner child does come out, and connecting back to our roots of what made us happy and also in our childhood.
Wonder, I'd
I,
love
I
you to.
think we forget.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we forget the simple joys of childhood, and for the most part, they don't cost much. Sometimes they don't cost anything except, of course, human energy and fellow human beings, and just a state of
Mhm.
simplicity, and a sense of gratitude that you know
Mhm.
makes the heart happy. And I think that's the thing. We forget that the inner child is also reconnecting with the parts of us that were just carefree, that were joyful in simple things, um, that marveled at things that didn't have to be complicated. And I think that's a part of me that I'm really working hard to reconnect with, because sometimes adulthood is put out to be so prim and proper, and we are all so uptight. It's
Mhm.
exhausting. Actually, you find your body is tense. We are tired of being too proper and too put together.
Mhm.
And I think we need to go back to, just realizing that a healthy human being needs play, needs laughter, needs all the things that a child needs. Being an adult doesn't take away from what you are at the core, which is a happy being. And I think those are because we talk a lot about reparenting the parts of us that were missing, um, but we don't talk about reparenting ourselves and reconnecting with the parts of us that were amazing,
Mhm.
that were healthy, that we lost along the way because life grilled certain mentalities into us, and too many burdens, half of which are quite unnecessary, to be honest. you know yeah, we can get there without half the burden. So yeah.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be unhealed. It doesn't have to be negative. It's both. It should be a balanced reparenting.
Thank you for that, John. As you
Um,
take the next, as you build on this, think
mhm.
about something for me.
Sure.
Because you mentioned the whole theology piece, and Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me." And I think as we enter this life journey, sometimes we enter it as the child, but we go out also as the child, right?
Hmm.
And the child had a certain characteristic to it that I think all of us want to eventually embody. But there are certain things that come into play here that impact that whole journey. So as you're responding, try to roll in that part as well.
We'll put the pressure on Dr. Jones. Jeez. um, One of the things that I would say is there's always been, whether societal, familial, or personal pressure to grow up. I
Mhm.
can't wait. We have these markers. I can't wait till I'm 16 so I could, well, in the United States. I can't wait until I'm 16 in order to be able to drive. I can't wait until I'm 18 so I can be considered an adult. I can't, in the United States, I can't wait till I'm 21 in order to be able to drink. I can't wait for this. And so we put these time markers on everything because we are such in a rush in order to be able to grow up. I love integration. That's why I love being able to fuse the sacred and the secular, the spirituality and the psychological. Even in the Bible, it says, "As you grow, put away childish things." And so we think that we can't really embrace that inner child that we have, but we really can, because it's the simple things that we learn as children that allow us to be these wonderful adults. And when we try to suppress that, that's when we become, as one Drew said, very stoic, very stiff, stressed out, overstimulated. And so we have to be able to tap into the joys of the inner child. One of the things that I personally do, and I know that at some point I'm going to have to stop, don't judge me, is I love going to an amusement park. I love
It's
riding roller.
amazing, Don.
I love it. And so I remember that because it was a part of my childhood. And whenever I rode the roller coaster as a child, it set off all of my endorphins. And so I had the rush. And it was only for, a couple of minutes, but you feel that rush. And so a small part of me in my adult life, I still ride those roller coasters because I want to be able to feel that same sensation that I felt when I was a child. Now, being honest, I'm getting old. Older. Those rides hit a little differently now. You go all the way up that steep bank. Oh Lord, I'm telling you, it hits a little different. So although I'm still going to ride the roller coasters, I'm going to limit the amount of roller coasters that I ride.
I love it. I love it. So, as we come to the later part of our show, I'd like to enter a space where we begin to think about the knowledge that the inner child can offer us to boost our emotional intelligence, right? So, we're in workplaces. We know emotional intelligence is it's key to team performance. It's key to team cohesion. It's key to team productivity, creativity, and innovation. And a lot of times, if we have not processed our emotions and if we have not tuned into the needs of that inner child, if we have not gone back and met the need of that inner child, oftentimes in a work environment, especially, the inner child can rise up because the inner child might not have been treated well by parents who are now authority figures, might not have been psychologically safe in terms of being valued, being respected, being celebrated, being welcomed. So we face all of these experiences that sometimes exclude us from the very place that we want to play, right? And so as we work with therapists, as we work with coaches, and we want to boost our emotional intelligence, is it essential for us to bring the inner child in? Number one, once we do, what kind of intelligence is this inner child going to give us so that we can function in these environments at the highest level with excellence, with productivity, creativity, innovation, as I mentioned? I'll leave
I
it
like.
to anyone who wants to start. Go ahead,
I'll
John.
chime in. I'll chime in on that. I think there was a book some years ago that says everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. I think that book is so true. I think that we need to tap into what we learned and go back to the basics. I think in our adulthood, in our maturing, in post high school, post undergrad, post graduate school, we got some, excuse my English, but it's perfect. We got some edumacation now. And we feel like we can't tap into that person because we have evolved. But that inner person, that inner child is still there. And whenever we suppress that inner child, we can't be fully ourselves. So when our bosses or when our supervisors give us constructive criticism, we automatically go to the defense. They don't respect me, or they don't like me, or they don't care for me, or something like that. And that may not be the truth at all. We are just not healed from that inner child. And we have to be able to tap into what we learned in kindergarten. They're just trying to make it the best product that it can be, and don't take it personal. Because I remember when I was in kindergarten, if I was corrected, it was okay. Because guess what? I can come back to school and do it again tomorrow. But we now, since we're adults, we're educated, we internalize everything, and we start making up things that spider web into a whole bunch of issues that have us on psychotropic drugs, have us in the therapy office, that have us doing all kinds of things in order to be able to cope and to manage. But I think if we were to truly go back to that inner child and the things we learned when we were younger, it's going to help us be able to um, defend where we are, or what we could be. Because sometimes we're not overreacting to what happened, we're overreacting to what to what our nervous system is telling us, and so sometimes it can be overstimulated.
Mhm.
I think for me, what comes to mind is in terms of the people interaction, call it teams. If you look at kids in a kindergarten, they talk about sharing is caring. And I know our workplace also has some level of competition, but children also compete, but in a healthy way. We talk about teamwork, about working together. So even games, children play together. And I always constantly think how much more we would accomplish in our workplaces if we did not see each other as enemies, as a competition, that we didn't push each other and keep each other at arm's length because we are constantly worried about what the next person has to take from us, or
Mhm.
if we didn't have to constantly look over our backs, imagine how much more we would accomplish. And as we're saying, kindergarten, those are things that we learn in adulthood. Children don't learn those things until much later, when
Mhm.
we clean that slate and then we tell them you need to compete and everyone needs to become the best. And then now we create this thing of everybody's competition and quote unquote everybody's the enemy, everybody's trying to take something away from me. And in that way we don't synergize and we don't support each other and we don't benefit from the different things that we're good at individually and then collectively.
Mhm.
So I just wish it was, I wish we'd go back to the basics of
Mhm.
kindergarten, where
Mhm.
you come together and you're using what we used to call plasticine. You guys call it Play-Doh, I think,
Mhm. Yes.
and you build
Yes.
things together and nobody's supervising anything and there's no better than, and and you're having a moment together, but at the end of the day, you've done the work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sydney,
Yeah.
weigh in.
Yeah, I echo both of their sentiments, and I think really in kindergarten, you just want friends. You just want to be with, oh, you're just so excited to be with people your age or people, and just get out of the house away from the parents and just go play and explore and see what's outside of your house and outside of your little bubble that you've been in. Right. And so I think really understanding again like the building blocks and sharing different things, or you start sharing, oh, like my friend brought in a red car and I brought this in, right? And just sharing and being so excited to share and see what other people have. And I think in the workplace, again, like we see each other as competition, but it's like, again, at the end of the day, you're in the same organization, you're in a team, and then not understanding how along the way things happen. People, I believe it was mentioned, like people feel like people were praised for their accomplishments, people were praised for their accomplishments, and that creates a different dynamic. And we're all showing up in different ways, and even in kindergarten we were showing up in different ways, but it was accepted and appreciated, and along the way it kind of got lost. And so to really also know that what are your strengths that you're bringing to the table, and what are the strengths that other people are bringing to the table. We're all unique, we all have different things that we bring to the table. We have our weaknesses, we have our strengths. How can we really work together to leverage our strengths? Or if someone has a weakness but they want to improve their weakness, is that something you're good at? That sharing piece again, how to you want to get better at that weakness. I'm that's one of my strengths, like I can help you with that. And having that conversation, and to really support in workplaces, and understanding, or even different family responsibilities and how that impacts how you're showing up. And recognizing that, again, from maybe a young age, and I'm the eldest daughter, and that comes with certain responsibilities and leads me to present myself in a certain way as I show up in the world and in workplaces and different environments. And recognizing that other people have different things going on too. And I think, again, when you're younger, people are showing up differently, but you don't care. You just want to be with them in that moment. But then as adults, we're like, this person showing up differently. They're different than me. They're a threat. And that kind of that last in translation. And so just meeting people where they're at, seeing what people only show you what they want you to see, right? You never know what's going on behind closed doors. And so, again, just coming from, hey, I want to be in community with this person. I want to be friends with this person. I want to get to know this person. and and then pulling back those layers of, again, knowing what's happening in the personal life, knowing what's going on behind the scenes. But it's up to that person to share that with you and you to share that with them. And sharing is caring. It's letting us into the little worlds, because we all have different worlds in our minds and how we show up and versus the reality.
Thank you for that. By the way, our audience is with us and they are loving your comments. We're thanking you for joining us this morning. And I know you're from in different regions that I was seeing as those segments were coming in. One person wrote, I do shadow journaling. What's the idea of what's the difference between a shadow and the inner child? Is there a difference between the shadow and the inner child?
I'm gonna let the ladies answer that one.
You stopped our panel audience.
I think it depends on the person. Again, it's like some person might say it is connected, and some people might say it's not connected, and that's okay, right? And so, for me, I kind of think it's separate. But if you think it's connected, more power to you, right? And to really, and it, again, depends on your experiences and what have you experienced in this life that and what does it mean to you to do shadow journaling? Could look different from someone else's shadow journaling, right? And so I think just understanding, again, that we're all different and we're all showing up different ways and processing in different ways of the things that happen to us and that have happened to us. And so I love to just regular journal and journal about my day, and reflect and do reflecting from that, sometimes from the inner child or inner teenager place. It's like, as a teenager, I had really bad depression and didn't think I would be alive today, right? And so just really sitting with that. And so what does it mean to you and how you're showing up for yourself?
So we are at our last bit of questions, or I'm going to just pose one last question as we go into the final segment. How did each of you come into the space where you are today, and how did your inner child influence that journey? Wonder.
I'm thinking.
I can go first if no one else is ready.
Please go ahead,
Sydney. Okay,
I can
go first.
I can give you a moment to think about that. Yes. So for me, my mom's a nurse by trade, and I'm biracial. So my dad's family is from the UK, and my mom's family is from Guyana. And I was always, for the longest time, and because again, my mom's a nurse, she was always help people, right? And for the longest time, so I say I've been doing this work since I was in grade 1, because I remember sometimes in classrooms, there was these other students having meltdowns or having moments and needing to clearly leave the classroom. They were overstimulated or something was going on, and the teacher's overwhelmed with all the other students in the class. So we had a washroom pass, and I'd be like, "Teacher, we're going to the washroom, bye," and just take them out of the classroom. Like, "Hey, I hear you like cars," or like, "What do you like to do outside of school?" Like, and getting to talk to them and just calming them down, right? And just having a conversation and seeing them as a human. And they actually did identify with being neurodivergent. Didn't have the vernacular back there, and I'm also neurodivergent, but also didn't know it then. And really understanding how my innate need to help people and to meet people where they're at and to help them succeed, what that looks like for them. Then, we would go back to the classroom. He'd be more settled, he'd be more calm and ready to do his work. Right. And so I joke that I've been doing this work for a long time. And I think now also I've realized the importance of, I need to get help. I need to take care of myself. For the longest time, I feel like I struggled with that aspect. And so now being able to balance between, if I want to help people the way I want to help people, I have to help myself first. I have to go to therapy on a regular basis. I have to do my workouts. I have to do my journaling. I have to take care of me to be able to show up the best way I want to show up.
Wonder.
Nice. So as a Kenyan, I had a very interesting, lovely experience growing up. I think, it's a blend of very African, but also, blend of a lot of Western influence. I really always was curious about people. So, people say I always had this very intimidating stare since I was a kid. Like if guests come, I'd be kind of like really looking at them and trying to read them. Um, I'm a second born, so I guess as people say, three siblings, an older sibling and a younger one. So I think people say when you're in the middle, you're not really the one who was very fast about because you are not the new, and then you're not the last. So in a way, you acquire a sense of independence because you're right there in the middle. Maybe that had something to do with it. And then in 2013, I became, and so I studied psychology because I always loved it. I mean, I read magazines, psychology content since I was in primary school. And then I dropped that because at that time it was an older people, and it was a field that was only had much older people in my country, and I couldn't find a spot where I fit. So I studied this thing that I loved, and I couldn't figure out where to apply it. And so I left, and I went to the airline, and I stayed there for a while, just trying to find myself. And then I became a mom in 2013. So I have a 13-year-old teen, and I had just left work at the airline, and I had a moment, duration of time where I was with my child, and I suddenly fell in love with children, and the psychology that I had shelved, came to life. And so I started, blogging about children and explaining a lot of developmental behavior and a lot of that, and then working with parents. And so that's the space I've been in for since then. I think also as a person, as Sydney has said, I'm somebody who likes to help. I have had to learn to put boundaries in that. I always say, in a way, quote unquote, I'm a recovered over empath. I don't even know if you can over empath. I'm a recovered, I'm a recovered empath, or I am. I have learned how to do everything in a healthy way. And so also my own personal journeys, and as Sydney has said, you go for your own therapy, you grow, you unpack parts of yourself. And so as you're helping other people, you're not far removed from the human experience. It's very much part of your everyday experience, including me being in the parenting space and me being a parent. So I'm not far removed also from the experiences of other parents. And I say it's a community. It's like if you're a doctor and then you just happen to be amongst people, tomorrow you're the sick one, and then you need somebody else. So you're not exempt from the experience. And I love that part of it because it keeps me humble enough to not feel like I'm better than, but also then the knowledge also sometimes helps me to be able to give something to somebody who may not know how to apply it. And that's my space. And then I grew up in a musical family where both my parents were in the music. Um, well, my dad was a businessman, but he also did recordings. And so there's this artistic part of me that has refused to leave my soul. So I'm also somebody who believes in having fun and
Yes,
integrating bits of professionalism with fun. Like I believe music is a big part of our mental health. So yeah, it's those bits of my Kenyanness and my Africanness that I also love, and I wouldn't want to trade. In fact, I feel like those are part of the those are the parts of us that we kind of need to unpack because they've been shelved too much. We've become too prim and proper. We've lost parts of us that are just joyful. Yeah, so
fantastic.
that's
Thank you
that's
for
me.
that. John, you have 1 minute and then my close. So if you could quickly let us know how you
Sure,
got it.
I'll give you 30 seconds. I need you to lean in just a little bit.
Mhm.
Lean in, Wanderer, lean in. I was
Oh, okay.
We're
I
all
was
leaning in, John.
I was trying to diagnose myself.
The
Mm,
most brilliant,
Mm,
authentic, truthful, because many of us,
yeah.
even as psychotherapists, don't even know that we are here to heal ourselves, and that actually, if we
Mm,
support ourselves with the healing, we go so much further. We always think we have to save other people, but if we could just say,
mm,
I'm just here to save me. I want to
mm.
thank
yeah.
our incredible guest. I want to thank John Burton, Wanjaru, Kinutia. I think that's how I did it, Wanjaru. Sydney Elaine Butler. You are all awesome human beings, and I thank you for sharing your wisdom today. For everyone watching and listening, we will be sharing full contact details for our guests and the resources from them that will support you in supporting your inner child. Thank you for tuning in to Black Mental Health Matters. Remember, healing your inner child is an act of deep self-compassion and generational change. Be gentle with yourselves as you move through your day.